Hi everybody, it's Aaron Davison, and during this video I'm going to talk about what it takes to make a full-time living licensing music in television, films, commercials, ads, and so on. And the ideas that I'm going to present to you in this video are based on the last 7 years of personally licensing my own music, and also interviewing and working with dozens and dozens of different songwriters over the last few years via my website, howtolicenseyourmusic.com. And I've done a lot of podcasts and a lot of different interviews of songwriters who license music and make a full-time living licensing music over the last few years. And a sort of pattern has emerged. I've talked to enough songwriters at this point where I feel like I can present to you a pretty typical pattern of what it takes to get to a full-time living, or in some cases even just a really good part-time income. So the first thing is you have to keep in mind, if you're trying to make really good money licensing music, beyond just a couple $1,000s here, a couple $1,000s there sort of thing, if you're trying to really make a good portion of your income or all of your income from music licensing, you have to realize it's a long-term endeavor. And I think this is true of really anything in the music business. I mean, the music business is obviously not some sort of get-rich-quick scheme. I think that the music business is probably the last business I would go into if I was trying to make a lot of money really fast. You can make money in the music business, and in some cases, you can make really good money, but usually it takes time to develop. And I think it's true whether you're trying to become a performing singer-songwriter, if you're trying to become a session musician, or if you're trying to license music, or like whatever it is you're trying to do in the music business, most likely it's going to take time to develop and get off the ground. Music licensing is no exception. So if that's not what you were expecting to hear, I hate to sort of break that bad news to you right out of the gate, but it's the reality of music licensing. But with that said, it's not all bad news. I think anything you try to do in life, any sort of worthwhile endeavor is going to take time. So with that said, here's sort of a pattern that I've seen amongst a lot of different songwriters that I've worked with who do really well licensing music. Usually what happens is something like this. The first year or two is sort of slow going. Obviously there's exceptions. Some people, I had success licensing my own music pretty quickly, basically just due to sort of luck and some connections I had. But usually for most writers that I work with, it takes time. The initial year, if your music, let's assume your music is ready to go and you have a catalog of music that's ready to be licensed. By catalog, I mean an album, at least, maybe a couple albums. If you have material ready to be licensed that sort of meets the criteria of what music supervisors are looking for, usually the first year is about building connections. And what writers have to understand is that it takes time just really due to the nature of music licensing, because music supervisors are looking for music for projects they're working on, whether it's TV shows or films, whatever it is, they're looking for something very specific. So the chances of your first, let's say you connect with a music publisher, for example, the chances of you having material right out of the gate that are exactly what a music supervisor is looking for are usually kind of slim. I mean, it could happen, and it does happen, but usually a more likely scenario is you connect with music publishers or music supervisors. You're just connecting with people in general that license music. And over time, through building up these connections, eventually opportunities will come along that are relevant to what you do stylistically and the style of music you make. So a likely scenario is you spend the first year connecting with publishers, signing deals, and then again, I can only sort of give you hypothetical scenarios. There's no one-size-fits-all scenario, but maybe, let's say, for example, maybe 6 months or 7 months into connecting with different publishers and libraries, you have some of your music licensed. There's an opportunity that comes along that you're actually a good fit for. You start licensing your music, maybe a couple months later, you get another placement. And usually it's a little slow going in the beginning, but it builds over time. And it's the sort of thing that if you pursue consistently enough and regularly enough, you can build up really good income from. And like I said, I've worked with a lot of different songwriters, excuse me, over the last few years. And I've seen this pattern play out over and over in a very similar fashion. I just did a podcast with a songwriter a couple weeks ago, a guy named Paul Glover, who started pursuing music licensing about 5 years ago. He spent the first year really just getting his production and production quality up to speed. He spent the second year marketing and networking with different people in the business. And it really wasn't until the third year where he started to see a lot of placements. And now 5 years into this, he's had his music on over 200 television shows. He makes a really good income from music licensing, but it took him 5 years to build up. And, some writers that I work with here, numbers like 3, 4, 5 years, and they're sort of overwhelmed. They think it's way too much time. But if you think about it, anything you do in life is going to take several years, most likely, to become successful. You go to college for 4 years. If you get a master's degree, you go for 6 years. If you get a doctorate, it takes 8 years, and so on. So I think anything worthwhile is going to take time. With that said, there are obviously ways you can sort of expedite this process of becoming successful in the music licensing business. Just like there are faster routes to becoming successful in business or any endeavor, there are things you can do to achieve success more quickly. And I think the number one thing, apart from the actual music, it obviously starts with the music first and foremost. But assuming your music is where it needs to be and you're producing and creating quality music that there's a market for, assuming you're doing that correctly, the number one thing you can really focus on to expedite your success is connecting with people in the business. Your music, obviously, you need to get your music into the hands of people that actually license music in order to license music. I know it's sort of an obvious, sort of a duh sort of statement, but you need to do this, and you need to do it on a regular basis. One of the things I do in my program, the 90-Day Music Licensing Challenge that I offer, is I have writers that take that program, connect with people who license music every single day for 90 consecutive days. And I think the reason this program has been so successful, and I've had dozens of people go through this and license their music as a result, and I think the reason it works so well is the writers that are taking this program are taking very specific action steps every day, connecting with people who license music. So I think if you're looking to license music and you want to license more music, whether you want to do this full-time or you want to make a good part-time income from licensing music, you really need to connect with a lot of people to kind of get this ball rolling. So if you're interested in taking the 90-Day Music Licensing Challenge, I'll link to the website that has all the details about that program below this video. So I encourage you to check that out. But whether or not you take my program, if you want to license music, you have to take action steps every day. I'll also link to the video or the podcast rather that I did with Paul Glover, the guy who has had music in over 200 television shows, below this video as well. I think that's a really good podcast worth checking out. One of the things Paul talks about in the podcast is that he gets up every morning at 5 a.m. And spends several hours a day on music licensing and connecting with people and networking with people. And you really have to do this on a regular basis. It's this isn't something you can sort of dabble in and be successful at. Like anything, you need to work at it. You need to work at it regularly. And if you do this enough over time, you can really build this up to a substantial income.